Okay, we are live, everyone. Hi there. Thank you all for being here on this Thursday evening. There are probably a lot of other places you could be, but Liz and I truly appreciate you being here with us tonight. So we're thrilled to have you. My name is Megan Wagner, and I'm the author of Fighting Fired with Fire, and my book right here. It's a guide to coping with job loss, rising from the ashes to discover your career passions again. I'm also a marketing consultant. I'm a blogger, photographer, and painter. Very amateur, but it's the things I enjoy doing. I own my own marketing business, which I'm very proud of, and I love and enjoy. And that way, it wasn't always that way. Just a few years ago, I was working in a job I hated, and I ended up actually losing my job, and it was very stressful at the time, but it was also the best thing that could have ever happened to me. So it's been a wonderful journey, and this journey brought me to Liz along the way. So we've got Liz Nolley Tillman with us this evening. Liz is the author of Great Work, Great Rewards, 7 Secrets for Breaking the Performance Punishment Cycle. She is a marketing communications professional who has spent over 25 years in corporate America. Liz's experience includes various leadership positions in marketing, communications with UBS Financial Services, Allstate Insurance Company, GFK Custom Research, and AIG, as well as on the agency side, like myself. And she's an integrated marketing consultant. So Liz, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yes,
Pleasure. Happy to be here.
Yes. Oh, we're so thrilled. Liz and I met while going through our self-publishing, or in our self-publishing community. And that's one of the biggest blessings that came my way after I lost my job, because I knew I wanted to write a book, didn't quite know how to go about doing it. And so I met some fantastic people along the way, and Liz certainly in that great group of people who I've been able to connect with and learn from. And so Liz is here to speak about workplace punishment, or work performance punishment, that is.
Performance punishment, yep.
Yeah, and I explained to my my daily email group that it's that thing where you do a really good job, and then you get more work piled on you, and then you hate your life. So it's something like that. But it's definitely something I think we've all experienced at one point or another. We've all loved our jobs at some point, and then just got more and more and more stuff piled on us. We were taken for granted. We see other lazier employees, get stuff, passed over. I mean, it's not good. So anyway, Liz, you're going to be the voice of reason of all of this madness that's going on in corporate. But before we get started, I want to open up a poll. Oh, hi, Pamela. How are you? Pamela joined us from a short class break. So thank you for joining us. Yeah. So we've got a poll that we just want to get a gauge on. And if you could just take a quick few seconds to answer this, tell us what your biggest frustration in the workplace is. So is it keeping a positive attitude in a negative work environment? If you're always asked to do tasks that don't necessarily have anything to do with your job, but you're asked to do them anyway. Getting pulled in too many different directions, that always seems to happen quite a lot with people who are really reliable and are the go-to person. Or if you say no to a task, you're afraid somebody's going to get mad at you. So if everybody could take just a quick second to answer those, because Liz will help us answer those issues, because I know they happen a lot, unfortunately. Yeah. So Liz, while our participants are filling out the poll, why don't you tell us about yourself? I know other than what I've already alluded to. So we'd love to hear about you and why you wrote this book.
Sure. So you've done such a nice job at describing the phenomenon of performance punishment. And
but speaking from true experience, I'll tell you.
Yeah, and the book comes from my experience. There's a lot of research in there, lots of proven strategies and things like that. But basically, earlier in my career, I often found myself in a situation where I was achieving a lot, but I didn't feel like I was getting all of the rewards for that work. And, because of the way that I'm wired, I just can't not do my best. And I always found, people were like, well, you got to work smarter, not harder. And, and you hear all these things and you're just like, but it's got to be done right. And it's got to be done like this. And but because of that, I had this kind of very strong achievement orientation, I often found myself not rewarded, or was working against me in a lot of ways. And I couldn't understand why. So, inevitably I would get frustrated. I'd feel undervalued, underappreciated. I'd get frustrated. And at the time I thought, I'm just going to find a new job. But what I learned was the issue wasn't my job, because I'd often, get going in the new spot and boom, I'd be right back where I was in the old spot. And that's because I needed to do some things differently. I needed to regain control of my situation so that I could be happy at work and be rewarded for it. But this process took me many, many years to sort of figure out for myself the softer skills that I needed to develop, because I had great technical skills. I was a good writer, I'm a good communicator, I was a good strategist and all of that. But my issue wasn't a technical skills issue. It was these softer skills that I really needed to develop and change my mindset in a lot of ways in order to break free of this whole kind of phenomenon that we're now talking about called performance punishment. So to save people 15, 20 years of time, I've kind of put all of those life lessons that I've learned, all of the advice, the exercises, everything that career coaches, life coaches have worked with me to help develop, and research that I've done, articles that I've found, and I've kind of synthesized all of that in my book, which is kind of part, I always tell people it's sort of part self-help, business self-help, part workbook, because there's exercises and self-reflections and self-checks throughout it, because I really wanted to give people something to action. Like it's not just about reading it and saying, okay, intellectually I get it, but it's really putting those things into action and practicing them, because that's what worked for me. And that's what works for people, for people who really want to make a change in their situation. You have to put the work in. So part of it's intellectualizing it, and then the other half of it is actually doing the work. So that's kind of how I set up the book. And I just wanted to really just try to help people break free of this cycle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fantastic. And certainly this topic is needs to be discussed, because I read an article, I think a poll from Gallup the other day, mm-hmm. that said that only 30% of Americans are happy in their job.
I saw that.
Yeah, that means there are another 60+% that hate what they're doing, or 70% that is, that either are unengaged or they just hate life. So and that to me is just mind-boggling, especially now that I own my own business and I love the work I do. I look back and I'm like, I cannot believe I spent all those many years in a role that just was unfulfilling and unappreciated, and it was it's sad. It's very sad.
We do it because we get caught up, right? And we can't break this. That's why I call it a cycle, because you go through these kinds of ups and downs, and and you get caught up. It's like swimming in quicksand, or and in my book I quote George Jetson from the Jetsons, like, Jane, stop this crazy thing. And and sometimes that's what it feels like, because you're running fast and you're not getting anywhere, you're not getting to where you want to be. And it's amazing. There's this Institute for Corporate Productivity study that says that over half of the companies that they survey, and they work with like 600 plus companies,
Wow.
50% of them engage in a practice called talent hoarding, which is a form of performance punishment. And basically what that is, and since I wrote the book, people are like, yes, that's my life, you know. But basically what that is when you're a top performer and maybe you want to be promoted or you want to move into a new role or take on a new assignment or do something else, but your boss says, nope, you're too valuable to the team where you are. I need you here. I can't let you go. I can't let you transfer. I can't let you do this. And, you know, that's the whole promise of working in a big company, is that you have that mobility piece and everything, but it happens like 50% of companies engage in this, and it has an impact on performance. The same study shows that 74% of the lowest business performing companies engage in this. 74%.
Wow.
So, you know, so to your point, you have to talk about it. But what I found is, you know, talking about it, the process of talking about it starts with kind of putting a name on it, you know, calling it something. And I've had so many people reach out to me that found my book or read it or came across my blog post on my website or whatever. And they're like, yes, finally a name for something. I knew it wasn't me, you know. So no, you're not crazy. No, it's not just you. But yes, you can break free. That's the good news.
Right.
You know? So,
absolutely. Yeah. Well, that is a great segue to my first question for you. But before we do, I just want to let everyone know who's tuning in. If you go to the chat feature on the right-hand side of your screen, we will be answering questions throughout the night. So I will have the chat up, and if you have a question for Liz, if she's talking about something, just feel free to type your question in the chat box, and we'll get right to it. And also the poll, the poll came back that half of our viewers tonight, their biggest frustration in the workplace was keeping a positive attitude in a negative work environment, and also getting pulled in too many different directions. So, Liz, I'm sure we'll be able to speak to that as we go along throughout the next hour. So now that we have a name for it, now that's something we can talk about, how do you identify whether you're actually receiving performance punishment or whether it's just a boss having faith in you? Because I think there's a very, very fine line. So how do you identify if you truly are getting taken advantage of, and either you or somebody you care about? Because I think a lot of times, when we form relationships at work, we form friendships, and we see it happen to one of our friends, and we like, oh, that's not right. So, so how do you identify workplace punishment or performance punishment?
Yeah, I think the first step is recognizing that it's not necessarily something that's done to us, right? It's something we experience, right? Yeah. Because because two people could work in the same environment and one is experiencing it one way and somebody else is having a totally different experience. But we think it's being done to us. We think the problem is our evil boss or those crazy coworkers or whatever. But more often than not, it's a matter of how we're experiencing things, and it's a matter of our own perspective. That's not to say you can have bad bosses and everything, but performance punishment isn't really that. Basically, what it feels like if you're underappreciated for your outstanding contribution. It feels like you're trying to work hard and play hard, but you can't play hard. It's all about work. It feels like you're doing a great job and they keep giving you more things to do. And it feels, whether or not that's inside or outside of your job description, right? It feels like you're being denied opportunities to grow because you're too valuable where you are. That's sort of what it feels like. And you feel caught up in it because you were raised to do your best. You're raised to be a team player. You want to be reliable. It's all those kind of superpowers that make you that go-to person on the team that get you tripped up. And because you have trouble saying no, because, it becomes very difficult to manage expectations. It becomes very difficult to communicate without being emotional about how you're feeling, and you're stressed out, and, um, you can't see kind of the forest for the trees. So it feels like it's this horrible, awful thing being done to you. But what I've found and what I teach people is that, you can flip it around, like chances are the people who are quote unquote doing this to you don't even realize that that's how you're experiencing it, but, but from your perspective, you're coming in early, staying late, and putting out fires, being like basically your company's resident MacGyver or whatever on a regular basis. Whereas, and you look across the cube from where you sit and you see your coworkers, coming to work at 9:01 and leaving at 4:59. And you're just like, this isn't right. It's not fair. So if you're feeling those things, if you can relate to some of those frustrations, like you can't move on and get promoted because you're too valuable where you are, or you're feeling this frustration, like excellence is your standard, but okay is good enough for everybody else, then yeah, it's probably performance punishment. But if you practice some of the strategies for kind of breaking free of that, what you'll find is most of the time your boss and your coworkers, your colleagues don't even realize that that's how you feel. Why? Because you keep getting the job done. So you owe it to yourself to kind of stop, pause, and then put some of these strategies into practice to change the paradigm that you're experiencing.
Yeah, that's that, and you're right when you say, and it's almost like comparative, because you find yourself comparing to that person who gets there at 9:01 and leaves at 4:59. I mean, right. And you're like, what the heck's going on? Like, that's not fair.
And in your head, that makes you hate that person, right?
Oh, I know, right? It's
like, word, but yeah. You're like, oh, I can't stand, and you go home and you're complaining to your friends or your spouse or your partner or whatever. And that person's just living their life. They're not living a balanced work life, to make you feel bad.
Right. That's true.
When what we need to be thinking is, okay, what have they figured out that I haven't? And true. What kinds of things about my situation can I tweak, fix, tailor, adjust so that I can have a balanced work life, a balance between my work life and my professional life. That's where the mindset shift needs to take place.
Oh, nice. Yeah. So when we talk about being the go-to person or the fixer, or like the Olivia Pope in your your building, or the person that just handles it, it's especially if you've been there, whether if you've been there 6 months or 6 years, you have this additional sense of responsibility whenever you come into an organization or have been there for a while. And so tell me about the disadvantages of being the go-to person, the fixer, right, and the person that handles everything. What are some disadvantages?
Go-to people, we have we're wired a certain way. We have certain characteristics, right, that are our superpowers. We're reliable. We get stuff done. We can multitask. We have great technical skills. We work hard. We can be counted on. We get the job done. We'll do what it takes to get the job done, more importantly, right? So all of those things make us the go-to people on the team, and they make us top performers on the team. But one of the first kind of difficult truth, I call it, that you have to kind of grapple with if you want to break free of this performance punishment cycle is that the same superpowers that make us that go-to person on the team trip us up. So it's sort of, they can be a double-edged sword if we allow them to be. So, so being an accommodating team player means that you probably struggle with saying no. And you probably, or being a multitasker means that compared to your peers, you probably can get more things done. And that the double-edged sword to that is that we're asked to do twice as much. So, so basically, go-to members of the team, they kind of risk being falling victim to unrealistically high expectations of their performance. Because you work that miracle, you do it once, that becomes what's expected of you as normal. It's not normal, but because of your orientation to achieve, you keep doing it over and over and over again, and it becomes normal. So it's not that your boss is some horrible person that keeps dumping on you. It's just that you've shown what you can do, so they expect you to keep doing it, right?
Right.
And by comparison, other people are just kind of like cruising along doing okay. Not exceptional, but exceptional, so praise is harder to win, recognition is harder to win, the rewards are harder to win because your good is other people's great. And so that's sort of the cycle that we as go-to people get caught up in, that leads us into this cycle of performance punishment.
Yeah. And again, we fall into this comparative scenario with other people, and they're like, just going back to looking at Joe Schmo, who's sitting there just loving life. We're buried in piles of things to do. So so when we talk about being the go-to person, we obviously have this sense of perfectionism. I mean, we want to be perfect, we want to do good, we want to be the person that fixes everything. So can you tell me a little about perfectionism and how it can be a double-edged sword, how it's not necessarily a good thing in your career?
Yeah, absolutely. Perfectionism can absolutely be the enemy of the good, right?
Right.
Like in a workshop that I just did about a week or so ago on work-life balance, I put up a slide and it has a picture of this person cutting the grass with a tape measure and a pair of scissors. Now that's a perfectionist for you, right? Like they're going to make sure that every blade of grass is uniform, and they probably have the best lawn in the neighborhood, but then I challenge people. I said, okay, what's the advantages of cutting the lawn this way? And they all say, oh, the lawn probably looks great, it's the best looking house in the neighborhood. I'm like, okay, but can you see the downside to that? What's the downside? Oh, it probably took forever and your back is sore, and it's not the most efficient way to work, and you suffer from that physically, right? The pain of going through and cutting every blade of grass to get this product, and it's time consuming, it's physically consuming as well. And perfectionism, it's a great metaphor for getting caught up in a perfectionistic kind of tendencies, because we strive to get it perfect when really good will do just fine, right? And so because and it's another one of those, it's kind of the umbrella of all those superpowers that we talked about, that it's kind of like the wrapper or the box that all those superpowers go in, and all of those things lead us to be perfectionists. And so because we're striving to be perfect, we can't let it go. We no, just one more email before I leave, 15 more minutes and I'll be home. And 15 minutes turns to an hour, turns to 2 hours, turns to, like you're home long enough to shower, cat nap, and then you're back at it again. And that's the day, it's a very slippery slope with perfectionism. So we have to, kind of retrain ourselves, reorient ourselves to say, what, it doesn't have to be perfect, but I know it's going to be really good. And we know it's going to be really good. Your boss actually knows it's going to be really good because they asked you to do it, because that's just who you are. You're not going to put out an inferior product, but it doesn't have to be perfect to be good enough. And and we have to learn to kind of break free of that thinking. Otherwise we'll be caught up pursuing the unachievable goal of perfection. It's just not something, it's like the carrot at the end of the stick, like luring the horse down the pathway. The horse will never get that carrot, and perfection is the same thing. You'll never achieve it. And you can literally drive yourself crazy, literally make yourself sick from worry, stress, and everything else if that is your goal. But a lot of us have those tendencies and we get caught up, and it starts to take a mental toll on us and a physical toll on us too.
Yeah. There's also the flip side of perfectionism because you think about we're all human. We
Yes.
all make mistakes. So if you have that unrealistic view of perfectionism, the higher you go, the harder you fall. And so,
Absolutely.
and so I remember, in one of my past corporate jobs, I was in charge of a publication, and there was like a typo in it. Like, I mean, it's a decently, it's not just like 10, it's way more than 10 pages. I mean, it was a pretty lengthy publication, but that one typo, oh, I just thought it was like the end of the world. I was like, oh my God. But that happens.
That's
And
classic
yes,
perfectionism. Yeah.
yes, absolutely. And even before that, I had a manager who told me something that it's always stuck in my mind. Now, you and I both work in marketing. We're not doctors. We don't have people's lives in our hands. We have people's businesses, which are pretty much their lives, but we
Right.
don't have a living, breathing human person in our hands. And one time something happened, and again, it wasn't anything like earth shattering, but he looked at me and he said, Megan, we are not brain surgeons. There's nobody laying on the table. There's nobody's life that we have to save today. It's going to be okay.
That's right.
So really, when you think about that and making mistakes, and we think that they're bigger than what they really are, and then it makes you feel worse. It makes you feel worse as a person.
Absolutely. I think part of it too, it's sort of like, because we're perfectionists and we want to be accommodating, we want to get stuff done, just like we have trouble sometimes saying no to other people, we have trouble saying yes to ourselves and forgiving ourselves and saying and keeping things in their proper perspective. Yeah, that comma. Yeah, okay, you missed it. But you know what? You woke up this morning, the world didn't stop spinning. Life as we know it isn't over. You're not fighting zombies at the front door today. Like, it's going to be okay,
Right.
But when you're pursuing perfectionism, or you're caught up in, or your perfectionist superpower is ruling you instead of you ruling it, it's hard to see that. It's really hard to see that, because all you're focused on is that improbable, impossible goal of making it perfect all the time. Nobody can do that. Nobody can do that.
No, right.
And we have to forgive ourselves when that happens.
Yes. And that's so hard to do sometimes. I think we
Absolutely.
beat ourselves up. My brother is an optometrist, and he told me that 95% of his patients are totally happy with him, but it's the 5% that are either kind of like meh, or mad at him because he wouldn't do something for them or whatever. And he said that 5% is what keeps me up at night.
And you know what? Those 5% are probably unhappy with every service provider in their life. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Like, it's not him. But still, because of how he's wired, he wants to, deal with that 5% and get it down to 0, because 4% is not good enough.
Right. Yeah.
So,
you will never make everybody happy in this life.
That's right. And 95% is one heck of a hit rate by any stretch of an imagination, by any measure. 95% is exceptional in anything that you do, right? So, but because it's I talked about a mind shift, but our mindset says that we only focus on the 5% that maybe didn't go the way that we wanted it to, as opposed to celebrating and honoring the 95% that went just fine.
Yeah, exactly. So let's talk a little bit about your book. These 7 secrets for breaking the performance punishment cycle. How are, in general, obviously we want everyone to go check out your book because it's just awesome. It's got some fantastic information. But just when we're talking about the 7 secrets that you cover in the book, in your mind, what are the most important ways we can utilize some of those secrets when we're trying to get out of this spin cycle, this, hamster wheel, if you will? How do we utilize, some of those points that you make in your book to break ourselves free of what's going on?
Yeah, I think it's kind of two things. One is what I write in my book in terms of how to use that section, because the book has kind of three sections. The first section kind of delves into performance punishment, what it is, what it looks like, what it feels like, that sort of thing. Just so people know that they're in the right place and that it's not them. They're not crazy. This is a thing, right?
Yeah.
And then the second section are the 7 secrets. And then the last section is more about like what companies can do. It's, like what the best companies do to kind of minimize the occurrence for performance punishment. But that second section is the meat of the book. And what I tell people, and I write this in the book, and I tell people, you may not need all 7 secrets. It's not like first do this, then do that, then do this. It's not a step-by-step system that way. But what it is these are 7 strategies, softer skills, actionable things that you can do if you're caught up, and to break free or to get some big wins to really shift your perspective and regain control of your situation. So your issue might not be confidence, right? You might be fully confident. It might not be confidence, but maybe you need to get better control of your emotions. Right? And so I tell people, you can use like the shopping cart approach and pick the strategies that sort of work the best for you. Like, yeah, I'm struggling in this area. Or if you're not sure, read them all and try to practice them all so that you can find which ones are going to give you those quick wins that you need to really change things and shift things. So it's real for me. I needed all 7, and that's okay. You're like, that's okay, because part of it is just coming into your own self-awareness and saying, you know what, I need to stretch and grow in this area. I'm doing a little bit better at this area. So you don't have to read it sequentially. You can go to, you know what, I have a difficult conversation with my manager, and go right to the chapter on effective communication and how to like structure those conversations that are challenging and break free that way if you're afraid to speak up and advocate for yourself, So that's how I encourage people to do it, and then do the self-checks at the end of each chapter. I because it's such a emotionally intense topic for people, I didn't want the book to be depressing, right? Yeah. And I didn't want it to add to the angst and the agita. And I, as a corporate, professional for many, many years, I've been to a lot of trainings, been through a lot of, and I didn't want to just make it buzzwords and theoretical and stuff. I really wanted to keep it digestible, keep it relatively light, but give people enough so that they can say, okay, I get this concept, so let me go and practice this. So that's the second step, right? So the first step is just identifying which of those skills that you need to kind of work on and develop and tweak to get maximum change in your situation as quickly as you possibly can, right? Which areas are you struggling with the most, and focus on those first. And then step 2 is really practice. It's practice. It takes what research shows that it takes 30 days to develop a new skill. And make something a habit and a skill and kind of make it yours. So I've got action plans in the book to say, what am I going to do differently the next 30 days? What am I going to do over the next 90 days, a year from now, so that you can really fundamentally and meaningfully change your situation.
Yeah. You brought up a good point about having difficult conversations with your manager. Because and going back to our poll, that was one of the concern, or one of the biggest challenges was, how do I not make somebody mad? Yeah. If I am feeling overwhelmed, I'm not happy in my situation. I feel like I'm getting taken advantage of. What is that conversation, or how is that conversation with your manager structured? And what are some things you can do to not make it so intimidating and awkward? Because let's be real. You go to your boss, and especially nowadays in certain industries. If there are people a dime a dozen who would take your job in a heartbeat. So you don't want to, have your boss lose faith in you, but at the same time, it's a very touchy subject. So how would you, again, the structure of the conversation and how can people kind of tailor it to their own situations?
Yeah, I think what makes it difficult to communicate effectively in a performance punishment situation is the emotion. So you got to take the emotion out of it, right? The fear, fear, anger, frustration, whatever that emotional stew that you're caught up in is, you've got to take that out of it, right? So structuring the conversation is actually a key part of that process. And I have a whole chapter in the book that about how to gain control of your emotions and developing emotional intelligence and that sort of thing, if that's an area that you're struggling with. But part of structuring a conversation is to first realize that you should structure it. Don't go in there and wing it and freelance it and stuff like that, because if you do, your emotions can kind of, take over. And remember, your boss is looking for solutions. So you don't want to discuss people. You want to discuss process. You don't want to, you don't want to be negative. You want to keep it positive. And if there's an issue, you want to be as factual as possible, not throw your coworkers under the bus or do any of those things. So you want to have a dialogue that's constructive. Okay. So instead of going in there and saying, oh, I'm just so upset because Bobby gets to leave every day at 5:59 and I'm here until 6 and I can't stand him for doing that. I mean, I like him as a person, but I hate that. And next Friday is my kids' play at school, and and I just don't feel like anybody's going to let me leave, and I don't feel like you don't want to have. That's the conversation you don't want to have. That's when emotion takes place. Those are all of the don'ts, right? And in my book, I have a whole chart of communication do's and don'ts. Won't go through them all here, but you don't want to talk about other people. Instead, a more productive conversation is, listen, next Friday, my kid's in our school play, and it's really important to me to be there. I have already talked to Bobby and Sally, and they will cover for me during those few hours that I'll be out of the office. I'll have my iPhone handy too if something crazy happens. And I really appreciate your support on this. It's a much different conversation, but I kind of break it into like 4 parts. One, you have to be clear on what you want. Right. And not be afraid to ask for it. Because if you don't ask, you're guaranteed not to get it. Right. So you got to be clear on the ask. And 2, consider things from like your boss's point of view. And what does my manager really care how I feel about Bobby and Sue? No. They're not your therapist. They're not your mom. They're not Dr. Phil. You know what I mean? So, so don't do that. So consider what they do want. They want to know that if you're not here on Friday for a few hours to go see your kids play, that how is the work going to be getting done? And then address those concerns, so kind of consider your audience and structure your messages, which is step 3. What are those key talking points, and if you have to, write it down. In my book, I have a whole little worksheet that you can fill it in, like photocopy it and just fill it in and structure a conversation if you need to. And then finally, you want to leave that conversation with any agreements. So know what you're asking for. What agreements do you need? So can we agree that it's okay that I take next Friday off to go to my kids' thing? And in sales, it's called closing. But, so you want to make sure that you're clear on the ask, that you've considered things from, your audience's perspective, that you're clear on your message, and that you get the agreements. By the time you leave that conversation, you want to know what the next steps are and that everybody's on the same page. So that's a much, and I work in the book, I talk through step by step how to do that, how to structure the conversation. And I think a lot of us get so caught up that we feel like we're going to wing it, and we get there and the conversation goes to the right or to the left. And, but the key is to structure it in the first place. And then I kind of show you how to do that step by step in my book.
Oh, nice. So going with the plan.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Especially if it's a difficult conversation. You don't want to wing those. No.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to encourage everybody to ask Liz any questions. If you have them, just put them in the chat and we can cover those. But we do have, I do have Liz's book information available today. And let me pull that up on the screen real quick. So you can get Liz's book on Amazon. So I've got a button that you can buy now and find her book on Amazon. It's fantastic. And then I've got a few other things here too. So I'll pull up a screen. Okay, so we've got Liz's information up here on the screen. So Liz, of course, the author of Great Work, Great Rewards, 7 Secrets for Breaking the Performance Punishment Cycle. You can learn more about Liz at liznollytillman.com. Liz, now I hear that you've got an online course that you're developing and you've hosted a workshop. You got some really exciting stuff going on. Tell us a little bit about that too.
Yeah, so part of helping people is teaching this stuff, or and I think my style is it comes from a very authentic place. I'm not teaching people anything I don't know and haven't experienced myself, and haven't worked on and researched myself as well. So I'm developing an online course because I can't be everywhere, although I'm happy to try to be as many places as I want. So if you want me to come do a workshop for your group or company or whatever, I'm happy. I'm always delighted to do that. But part of it is people learn differently. So I'm putting together an online course that's really focused on the softer skills that I talk about in the 7 Secrets section of my book, like emotional intelligence, effective communication, how to be persuasive, establishing boundaries, managerial courage, et cetera. And I'm putting this course together so that people can dive into the content in my book in a much deeper, more personal way. Because sometimes it's hard to kind of do it yourself without a guide. And I would love to be everybody's personal guide, but the course hopefully will allow me to be that kind of personal virtual coach. And on my website too, I'm working with a growing number of coaches who are providing content, tip sheets, and things like that to help my readers kind of develop and achieve their next breakthrough and develop those skills that they need. So if you're a coach, please contact me. Would love to chat because I realize, as much as I do know and as much as I have to offer, I don't know everything. And so I'm reaching out to people, some of whom are authors, like writing books on networking and inner critics, yourself, others and stuff that I'm engaging, and all of that content will be available in full form eventually on the course or on my blog in some way, shape, form, or fashion. But the course is really based on those 7 secrets and helping people to really develop those skills, those softer skills, not the technical skills, but the softer skills that they need to get that next career breakthrough that they're striving for.
Great. And they can find more information on your website, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Great. So liznollytillman.com. So that's awesome, Liz. I'm interested to hear how your course comes along, because I too am looking at creating some online courses. So I teach at the college level, but I haven't done anything with my book, but there's definitely something in the works. So again, you can find Liz's book, Great Work, Great Rewards, 7 Secrets for Breaking the Performance Punishment Cycle, on Amazon. I believe the offer will be emailed to you, so you can feel free to take a look at Liz's book and snap it up. And then my book also is available online, Fighting Fired with Fire, a guide to coping with job loss, rising from the ashes, and igniting a career you love. And again, thank you everyone for being here today, because again, it's a Thursday and everybody's like ready for the weekend and probably got a million other plans going on. So I really, really appreciate everybody being here. So, hi, Martina. Great topic. Look forward to reading the book. Yeah. So Liz, thank you again so much for being here. I'm just, you're one of the, incredible people that I've met along this journey, and I appreciate you taking the time to chat with us this evening.
Thank you so much for having me, Megan. Anytime. Happy to do it.
All right. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great rest of your Thursday and have a great weekend.
Bye.
Okay, bye.